Here we are, this 3 o'clock hour, halfway through, and a lot to get to today. We've already been through the story that came down this afternoon about Wisconsin suing Miami because of tampering of a player that they had on their roster who was under contract with NIL, and now he's down in Miami. So that is yet another day in college athletics. But there's also other stories to get to. Micah Hudson's a young man that I got to know when he was at Lake Belton High School. Had him on his senior year on a high school podcast that I do. Really enjoyed him. Committed to and signed with Texas Tech. He's back with Texas Tech because he was there and left. And Don Williams, Lubbock Avalanche-Journal, joins us. Paul Catalina and David Smoke on 365 Sports. Don, thank you very much for your time. It's always great to have you. Do a great job covering the Texas Tech Red Raiders and that entire area. What do you think is the one, if or what misconception is the most when it comes to Micah Hudson?
Misconception. Well, I think probably the misconception that he should have played more last year than he played, and the reason why I say that is because people looked at it and thought, okay, 5-star receiver, and I've heard about this guy forever, super highly ranked recruit. He should walk in and start on day one. But what people were not taking into account was specifically his health. He had some type of, I think his arthroscopic type knee surgery done coming out of high school. So that happened, I think, right around the time that he arrived at Tech. So didn't work in spring practice last year and didn't really return until right around the start of preseason practice in August last year. Played some, but he had not had that benefit of spring practice. And then when they thought he was kind of ready to take off, and that was probably about 2/3 of the way into the season last year, then he had some sort of stress fracture, and that took him out of commission for a few weeks. Like the last month of the season. So I think that's probably the biggest misconception when people are asking why he didn't play more and have a bigger impact than he did last year, which his impact was 8 catches, a total of 8 catches in 8 games. I think biggest reason why is because he was spending a good part of the year much less than 100%, both before it started, the early part of the season, and then again at the end of the season.
Don, what spurred him into the portal? What was he dealing with? Like with all the injuries and stuff, you would think it would be kind of a no-brainer for him himself. Like, yeah, I was banged up this year. I didn't play enough, but next year I'll be fine. I'm feeling better. What happened that made him take this brief sojourn to College Station?
Well, now we only got to hear from him once, so we hadn't really heard Micah's side of the story. And the time we got to hear from him was in August last year. So I can only speculate on that. But, Joey McGuire said last week he thought they both made mistakes. He said he felt like he put way too much pressure on Micah. And at this time last year when I was writing about, the goings-on of the team coming out of spring, Joey said that he was better than there are like 4 professional football receivers that Joey coached in high school at Cedar Hill, and Joey said none of those guys are as good as Micah Hudson. And I was like, that's a mouthful. That's a mouthful. And he said it unequivocally. He also said, 2 or 3 years ago, he said it's never going to be the case that a freshman is going to walk in here and get a single-digit number. And then he gives Micah Hudson number 1. and I asked him, I read those words back to him, and I said, okay, well, what changed? And he said, and then he started talking about how great Micah Hudson was and how mature he was. And Joey said, okay, in hindsight, I put way too much pressure on him with all that stuff. And he said, I think Michael was also listening to some people, but he didn't specify who those people were. But, there was a lot of disgruntled fans, again, that he didn't come in and catch 60 passes for 1,000 yards in his first season. And I guess some people maybe closer to him were probably also disgruntled that he not only did he not catch 60 passes for 1,000 yards or pick your statistics, he also just didn't play a whole lot and much less start. And so Joey kind of implied that Micah was maybe getting some bad advice from somewhere.
I can I don't know if I say validate that, but because again, he was here in our backyard, and we do not as much high school football as we did before. I do games and I have a podcast, but can talk to Brian Cope and others, and that's kind of not just from Brian, but Joey or whatever. But yeah, that a lot of people got in his ear.
All right, we are building something that will shake the big brand in the industry.
I just couldn't help myself. It tasted so good. It smelled so good.
I drink so much water now.
No one has been able to provide great water and a compelling alternative to single-use bottles. And I became obsessed with solving that problem.
And
said, well, and kind of the implication that, or kind of the suggestion that we're impatient with how you're being used. You should also be impatient with how you're being used.
Yeah, absolutely. And then all of a sudden and I'm not going to call it an entourage, but his inner circle that might have had one or two trying to maybe get into his head a little bit because of what they wanted rather than what was best for Micah Hudson.
Yeah, and like I say again, that part of it's only speculate. I can only speculate on that. But Joey said on the record they thought Micah was, quote, listening to some people, and he said my mistake was I was putting way too much pressure on it.
So, how when you look at his potential to contribute this year, has that gone up in your mind now that he's been through all this, or are you still saying, well, let's wait and see how he comes through because he wasn't there in the spring? Obviously, he doesn't have to. There might be a little bit of a learning curve because of the new offensive coordinator, but do you think he can contribute in a way that is more expected of him this year?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say probably that's certainly fair. Like I say, it's not a high bar to clear to have more than 8 catches for 123 yards and 0 touchdowns, which is his numbers last year. So I think the fact that he's been exposed to college football and did play some in 8 games last year and has gone through, a year, or I guess close to, well, he wasn't in spring football with anybody, but, he's gone through a full season in the Big 12, been exposed to major college football, has maybe had has had some time maybe now to kind of clear his head and say, okay, maybe I jumped too quickly. Obviously, I guess he feels like he jumped too quickly because he was, as soon as he was in the portal and then transferred and then somewhere else, he was almost immediately of a mind to come back. So I think he probably should be in a better place mentally, so I guess psychologically, what have you. Maybe realized a little bit of what he gave up, and might come back in with in a better frame of mind. And I don't even want to say come in with a better attitude because one of the things that Joey really and most of the people around him seemed to really harp on early was they thought he was very mature. Not only did he have talent, but they also thought he was really mature. So yeah, I think he pretty clearly. I think if he's healthy, and I think again that's a big key. If he can have an extended stretch where he is healthy, he comes in with a new offensive coordinator, but all the guys on offense are with a new offensive coordinator too. Now they do have, I think the 3 kind of starting spots. He's not a first team guy. He's behind Reggie Virgil at one of the outside receiver spots, and Virgil is one of their high profile transfer commitments. He had a really big breakout year last year at Miami over Ohio, 41 catches, 816 yards, 9 touchdowns. Guy with a good bit of length and a lot of speed. And so Micah's, as it stands now, he's slotted as the second guy behind Virgil. But yeah, I would expect him to think he's in position to make a pretty good jump this coming year.
All I've heard from anybody inside or around the Tech football program, Don, is that he has been great since he returned, that his head has been down. He is focused on work. That there is no, anyone that might think he had his, but that's all I've heard from the time that he returned to Tech, which of course is back and forth where he was going to end up. Who knows? But that's the good news. And you know what? He's a kid. I know he's a young man. Hell, some of us can't handle things when we're 40, much less when you're 18 or 19 and you have all this attention. And you hate to see that. You don't want to see a kid become, get entitled or anything like that. But I don't know I don't think that ever happened with him. I just think he was mixed up a little bit. And then things didn't go quite as well as he or anyone expected. And so he was trying to maybe look around and get his head straight.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair characterization. Yeah. I wouldn't disagree with that.
So that's Micah Hudson. You mentioned the wide receiver room, of course, Aiken and Douglas, among many, many others. And I don't want to name all of them because there's a bunch of them. But here we are. We're about 3 weeks away from Big 12 Media Days, which we can't wait to be in Frisco to do that. Texas Tech, of course, had a great offseason. We know about the transfer portal, but also what they got in high school as far as that recruiting class, what they have coming back. Don, expectations are very high, and I think that's something that's a little bit different than when Joey first got there, when he maybe said a couple of things that came back to beat him up a little bit. What are the expectations, and is this team, if it's not 9 or 10 wins, going to be a disappointment?
If it's not 9 or 10, yeah, I would say that'd be a disappointment because I was about to say, I was kind of seeing where you're going with your questions, and I was going to say, I think if you asked Texas Tech fans, if you polled 1,000 Texas Tech fans and asked them their expected victory total for the Red Raiders, one number, I think you would kind of average out to where you'd put an over-under at 9.5. I think a lot of fans would say at least 9, and a lot of fans would say 10 or better. So, yeah, I think it's not. If it's not at least 9 wins, there's going to be considerable grumbling.
That's a number that you see when you have certain names that are attached to that, Paul. You can't screw. That's one of the things they've been able to win some of the games, beat the best teams in the conference last year, but then they blow a tire against somebody or get thumped at home by Baylor, who was reeling at the time. They can't afford any of that.
Don, one of the things that, and this is, I'm sure, a lot of Shieldwood's influence, but one of the things that has always kind of derailed Texas is they've never played a very physical brand of football on defense consistently. That appears, and look, even with the offensive line additions that they've made as well, they appear to be taking a step towards physicality that I don't think they have really ever made in the last 20 years or so. Am I right?
I was going to say 15, until since the tail end of the Mike Leach years. I think that's pretty accurate. Yeah, because they had some big time guys there at the end of the Leach years, just because they had been winning so consistently that they started to recruit well and develop guys to go along with it. So that 2008 team, Texas Tech is, in my estimation, is probably the most talented team that Texas Tech's ever had. I'd argue that they're not. I would say they're not the most accomplished. I would say they're the most talented. But really, I think it maybe as much talent as they've had since the 08, 09 guys. Those very end years. Now, I'd kind of caution though by saying there all these expectations and talking about must win 8, 9 games at least, 9 or 10 games. That's built almost entirely, but it's built largely on a bunch of guys who have never played for Texas Tech, because there's 21 guys that they got out of the transfer portal, and these are not fringe depth chart guys who are, okay, he's a second team guy, we already got the starter. No, most of these guys are either projected as walk-in starters, or cases say like a defensive tackle spot, a starter or a top rotation guy behind the starter. Nearly every one of those 21 guys is a guy that is projected to be a significant play a key role on this team. And so the fact that these guys came from, it's 21 guys who came from, I want to say 20 different places. I mean, Will Jados, offensive tackle, and Reggie Virgil, wide receiver, both came from Miami of Ohio. But you're talking about, again, 21 guys who I want to say came from 20 different schools or whatever. So you're talking guys who didn't know each other this time a year ago, now kind of thrown all together with a new offensive coordinator and a new defensive coordinator. And where's the chemistry? How is the chemistry going to develop with that group? And so while it looks like a good bit of talent on paper, I think there's still, quite a few questions to be asked here. It's also, they also took a bunch of guys who, particularly in the early portal, were, G5 guys as well. So, so some of these guys that they're counting on to be really good, like I said, mentioned Reggie Virgil. He's another good example. He had a big year at Miami, Ohio. Will he have a big year facing Big 12 conference teams? He has to prove that. So it should be a pretty fascinating thing to watch unfold and develop.
I saw, and I believe, and the high school recruiting, of course, is being overshadowed a little bit. Doesn't mean you still don't want to go out and get dogs or highly rated players or maybe diamonds in the rough. But I did see that they received a commitment from a kid from Palestine. And Vincent, I think his last name is Vincent. He's a defensive back there, and he is explosive. I had a coach Savoyan Martin, Martin. He's a 6'3" cornerback, but a senior this coming year. I had a coach in East Texas who's been around a long, long time say that he was the best defensive player that he saw last year playing high school football. So he's got another year to go, long way to go, whether he ends up at Tech or elsewhere. But I happen to see that might be a name that a lot of people haven't heard before. But I had a coach tell me that one time back when I was putting together my all Smoky teams.
Well, and you mentioned height there. I mean, this has been one thing that really has been a major focus and characteristic of the Joey McGuire staff is guys that are going to show up well in a combine type setting. Mm-hmm. Because it was the Sugar Bowl team from Baylor had 6 or 7 guys went to the combine and did really well at the combine. And they've been trying to, replicate that here, keep that same kind of strategy. And so their corners, they're really big on length at corner, 6'1", 6'2" guys. I mean, used to, if there was a guy who came in and he was 6'3", you thought, well, okay, he's a safety. Well, no, they're Tech's playing in the corner. And there's, that's not just one instance. There's a few instances of that. So they want guys who can really run, guys who do well on the track. And I think, one of the things I thought the biggest, probably failing or the biggest undoing maybe of the Cliff Kingsbury era and where the things kind of went off the rails is they just ceased to, recruit as good a talent as they need to have. And I thought that was the biggest thing missing, and the biggest thing that Joy had to rectify was that he had to upgrade the talent. And they are at least, I feel like, doing that in terms of, physical talent. Now, what comes along with that? Okay, they have more physical talent. How good are some of these guys going to be able to play football? But that's been kind of a starting point, though. Is if you come here, you're going to have length and you're going to be able to run, and we believe we can coach you up to play football.
Don, what has it been like to cover Texas Tech in the new era of the Matador Club and Cody Campbell, and knowing that anybody who would be like, I don't know if I want to move all the way out to Lubbock, and they go, oh, really? How about for this much money?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because Tech for, most of its first 100 years has always prided itself on being, this, particularly true of the fan base, but also, the team players and coaches themselves being the program that has less, does more with less, doesn't have the name and the budget and whatnot of Texas or Texas A&M, but is able to, doesn't have as many big time recruits as Texas and Texas A&M, but is able to do more. And now all of a sudden it's kind of changed because the NIL has made Tech be able to really compete with just about anybody that they want to. And we've seen it in the portal. The football portal this past off season was probably the best example, and that was probably topped by what they've done in the softball portal this off season, where it's just been like Texas Tech is kind of going to be like the LA Dodgers or New York Yankees. It's like if there's a player out there that they want, it's just a matter of, okay, how much do you want? Because we want you. I mean, you look at that. I mean, the softball, they already had Nizer Caddy, he's two-time National Player of the Year. Then they go get 3 All-Americans plus 2 I think it's 3 All-Americans plus 2 Conference Players of the Year in the softball portal. Just like back to back to back. One day it's this girl, and then the next day it's this girl and this girl, and they're all like I say, so all 3 I believe it's 3 All-Americans and 2 Conference Players of the Year is what they've got on the softball that they have just added after they were 1 win away from winning the national championship. And so, I wrote back a few months ago that when the House settlement was pending but not signed off on, I wrote that Texas Tech fans should hope that the House settlement falls through and that the judge doesn't sign off on it, because Tech has been thriving and flourishing with unregulated NIL.
Yeah, they're on a run
in most sports. Well, and men's basketball is another
Yep.
good example. They've been, Darian Williams. You go back to the team that played for the national championship game. Key players on that roster came from were guys who were transferred in. I guess that was pre NIL, but nevertheless transfers. I mean, the kind of player empowerment that we've seen, player empowerment, fewer restrictions on players, both in terms of latitude to transfer and ability to monetize their value. I mean, Tech has really benefited by that, and I think now it'll be. I wonder, will Tech be successful now that supposedly we're waiting to see if will this $600 third party NIL.
The NIL Go and what they have to go through the clearinghouse, Deloitte, and all that too. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Will that rein that kind of rein Tech back in?
Don,
I don't necessarily think it's a good thing for Tech with the way they have been thriving here these last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah,
they're to acquire talent.
They're on a run, and they're also getting coaches and paying for that. They're doing well like the Shieldwood, and then of course with what they have also with the offensive coordinator, and I mean and they're locked in. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. It'll be interesting to see. Expectations are great. You got to meet them. And if this is different than when Joey got excited after that game against Texas and talked about had to come through Lubbock and all that, that was just the excitement and went over the top on it, came back to bite him in the ass. So what was it, last year or the year before that? But there's no question they've got consistency right now, and now they got to go a little bit above that. Don Williams with us, Lubbock Avalanche-Journal, his article about Micah Hudson. And